Bonjour. Bonjour le Havre et France, c'est tout le monde. Et c'est tout pour le français pour moi. Uh, that's all I've got. And I hope that the English translate well. I'm honored to be here. I'm so interested to hear the conversations we've been having, to listen, to learn. And I hope that I can bring to you an interesting message as well. I think I've got some good news from California. I'm hoping that, you'll learn a little bit about San Francisco, but you'll learn about the planet in a way that you've never heard before. San Francisco has a resource recovery program that's very successful. I've been involved with it for 30 years. We are now at 80% diversion. That means we're pushing away from landfill 80% of the material that comes into the city, and we're taking that 20%, those discards, we're trying to figure out how to reuse, how to recycle, how to compost them, and get to our goal, though Bridget may disagree with it. Our goal is zero waste. In the solid waste management program, that's utopia, nirvana. It's a very, very difficult goal we've set for ourselves for 2020, but we think we can make it, and I want to tell you just a little bit about that program now. I'm going to go back. The system is a source-separated collection system of 3 bins. I think it's similar to some of the systems you have here in France and in Europe. The green bin is for organics. This is the new part that is unusual. The blue bin is for recyclables, paper, bottles, and cans. And the black bin is for everything else. But the black bin keeps getting smaller and smaller. Now I want to stop for a minute and come back to our program because I want to go global for a minute. Everyone in this room understands the crisis that we feel with the climate. And the nut of the problem is there's too much carbon in the atmosphere, too much CO2 in the atmosphere. We all know this. Not everyone in the world knows this, but we know this. And there's an additional problem with the carbon, is there's too much now in the oceans. It bleeds from the atmosphere into the ocean, and it turns the ocean acidic, which starts to kill off our sea life and destroy the food chain in the oceans. So there's too much carbon in 2 of these 2 places, and this is a tremendous problem that we have to solve. We need to get from 400 or more than 400 parts per million in the atmosphere now, down to 350, which is the last place we know is safe, and we actually need to go below that. So the question is, how can we possibly do this? Well, the one place where there's not enough carbon is in the soil, is in the pedosphere. It's the ground, the land. And it has been losing carbon for perhaps as long as 10,000 years since we started doing agriculture, but certainly for the last 300 to 400 years at a more rapid clip. In California, we're in the middle of we're at the beginning. We hope it's the middle, we hope it's the end, but it could be the beginning of a long drought. And the water that we lack makes the soil dry, and it leaves, even more carbon leaves the soil. So we have a very serious problem in California. However, at the same time that this drought has been developing for us, we have been finding some interesting things out about what we can do with soil. The solution that our scientists have shown for the carbon problem that I just described, this shift between the pools, is compost. It's as simple as this dirt-looking material that comes from the ground. Actually, it comes from our waste, and we put it on the ground. This is something you all know about. You all know about compost. But what we didn't know was the power that compost had. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Through research done by a scientific team from Lawrence Berkeley Lab, a federal laboratory in Berkeley, California, and UC Berkeley, the state of California's preeminent university, scientists with the Marin Carbon Project, a nonprofit research organization, have determined that there's a way that we can activate our soil through the use of compost. The compost turns the soil on in a way that accelerates or it augments the existing photosynthetic process. This slide here shows how carbon comes out of the atmosphere into the plants. And the thing that they've discovered, the discovery is how powerful the soil is. The thing that we all know is that carbon dioxide comes out of the air and into plants. We learned that in school. That's the carbon cycle. But what we didn't realize, or what I didn't realize, was that all of the carbon in our lives, all of the carbon in our clothes, in our food, in our trees, the carbon in our bodies comes from the atmosphere. It didn't come from the ground. It was photosynthetically transformed into carbohydrates by plants. And the opportunity we have here is to turn that engine on and begin to balance the equation between what's in the atmosphere and what's in the soil. And this is very, very powerful. What we found was that you can change soil carbon by practices, managed farm practices. You can use compost to reach this goal. This was not expected by the scientists. They didn't think that we could get carbon to be sequestered in the soil. They always thought that soil carbon would go back to the atmosphere in a respiration kind of process. But as it turns out, on rangeland, which is land that is not tilled, when you put the carbon down, put the compost down, the carbon comes in through the atmosphere. It's sucked down by the little straws that is the plants in the soil, and it stays in that soil. This is what the Berkeley scientists were able to prove. And this is an example of the plots of land that we did. We put compost on one portion and none on the other. We came back a year later. In each hectare of land that was treated with compost, there was an additional ton, 2,000 pounds, of elemental carbon in that soil. That's not CO2, that's elemental carbon, which is about 3 times more valuable than CO2, and means that that much CO2 came out of the atmosphere. What that shows, not just that in 1 year, but we came back. Now we have 7 years of research on this, and each year, the plot that had the compost on it has pulled an additional ton in. So we now have 7 additional tons in that land compared to the one next to it. This is amazing. The scientists did not believe that this, the biogeochemists at UC Berkeley, Wendy Silver, did not believe this was possible. The agronomists who were in the team felt we could make it happen. But Wendy was willing to do the science to prove whether it could be measured. And she found that it could be measured. There's new tools that we have that allow us to see more deeply into soil than we ever have before. What this suggests is that if we put enough compost on enough rangeland, we can start to pull enough carbon out of the atmosphere to change the equation. This is really regenerative. This is going to bring carbon out of the atmosphere. We're not just stopping putting it in. So it's a completely different equation than the ones we've been working so hard on. And this is by no means the geoengineering that you hear so much about. This is as natural a process as you could imagine. As this slide here shows, the rangeland is the most common type on the planet. It's where humans co-evolved with grazing animals. Much of the planet is employed with grazing animals. So the opportunity for us to affect the climate through a careful management of our rangelands seems very ripe. And we're doing the math now to understand exactly how possible this is. But I want you to understand this and start to look at this and talk about it and poke holes at it. I've been doing that for 3 years and I can't get anywhere. This is such a hopeful thing. I'm glad to be able to spread the word here with you. So what we want to do next is actually, this is an example of how the cows, 5 years after the original treatment you saw from that other slide, they still go back to the land that was treated with compost. Because that land has other attributes besides holding carbon. It's actually part of the holding of the carbon is the grass is more nutritious there. The soil holds more water, which is very important for us as we face this drought. We're going to need sponges to hold the water in California in order to face this drought, whatever water we get. What we've found, the calculations that we've done, that if California was able to put compost on 25% of the rangeland in California, we would offset the entire commercial and residential emissions in California in 1 year. And if we went on and did the next 25%, while that first 25% went through its second year of sequestering carbon, we would start to move into offsetting the remaining agricultural emissions in California. And if we went on and completed the job of getting all of the land, the rangelands in California sequestering carbon, we would be into this positive, a carbon positive situation, where we're pulling more out of the atmosphere than we're putting in other ways. This is really transformative. I mean, this is mind-blowing to someone like myself who's been in the recycling business for 30 years and fighting what felt like a losing battle. And I want you to take it with a grain of salt, but I want you to feel the hope that there is embedded in this. Now I want to go back to how does this connect to San Francisco, and better yet, how does it connect to you? The 3-bin system that I described to you in San Francisco is something that we dreamed up 20 years ago as part of a legislative initiative in California to reduce our disposal to landfill. And in San Francisco, we use the green bin for food because we don't have very big yards. So we started a program to get restaurants and produce stores and then eventually households to take the green bin and use it for all their foodstuffs. That has created a robust compost system that we can then use for things like the carbon sequestration. What I want you to know is that there's a way that you can participate in this. The folks who started this program in in San Francisco, are these guys. These guys are the great-great-grandfathers of the people who are currently collecting recyclables and compost in San Francisco. And I want you to know that you have ancestors like this in your town, in your country, who can help you find a system that replicates what we're doing in San Francisco. You have to use the knowledge that you have, and you'll find that it's not throwing everything out, it's revising what we currently have. We've also been able to teach our residents in San Francisco, not just residents, but our businesses, all of our city facilities have the green bin. We've taught them about the carbon cycle. This is something that I think in France you will get immediately. You are very in touch with your food. I see the way you shop. I see the food in the stores. This shows people how close we are to our own salvation, essentially, by putting the material we don't use back where it belongs. And to understand that there's such a powerful impact is a greater inducement. But we have other inducements. Actually, I want to show you just at the very top, the number 2,000, there's 720,000 tons to landfill 10 years ago. With our system, we reduced that down to 400,000 tons, more than half, reduced it by more than half over 10 years. At the same time, see the organic collection has been rising. People are simply taking it out of one cart, putting it into the other cart. Now, we're going to take that organic compost and put it out on the field. But we also gave people an incentive. We made it cheaper to put stuff into the green cart than into the black cart. We also go out and talk to them about what they're doing. We look in their carts. We actually see how well they're doing. We don't give them a ticket yet. We give them what we call a love note. It's a simple little showing of how much they've done right and how much they've done wrong. And the next day we'll come back and talk to them about how to fix it. These are things that you can do where you are. You can become a part of this solution right in your kitchen, right in your house, right in your town, and out in the fields. This is my message of hope. I hope you'll join us and ask us more about it. Thank you.